Good morning. We are here with Denny Lennon, creator of Sports Stories with Denny Lennon, and also the executive director of the AAU Sullivan Award, one of the most prestigious sports awards around, older than the Heisman. We are here today with Holistic Californian, and just wanted to get a little information and learn more about this amazing award and how you're bringing it to California.
Right, it's exciting. Yeah, I don't think it's ever been held in California, and it's interesting for me to be able to say I'm not sure because they got archives that go all the way back to 1930. So for the most part, it's always been held in New York, sometimes in Indianapolis, where the AAU had its original AAU House of Administration. It's been held in Florida certainly a few times, and maybe other places, but what an opportunity to be able to bring it out to Los Angeles. It has its own great sports history, and I love that we're doing this interview in Drake Stadium because right out there is Rafer Johnson Track, and Rafer Johnson won the award in 1960.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yep.
So tell me first a little more about Sports Stories, how you got started doing that, where the idea came from, and where you hope to take it in the future.
So I've always had a little bit of a voice in broadcasting, and back when I was in my young 20s, I traveled with Women's Pro Beach Volleyball and was their stage announcer and promoter. So I always had that, but along the same time, I was also involved in athletics, and primarily youth athletics. So I was an athletic director and a coach at a Catholic grade school, and then at some high schools, and concurrently I developed the sport along with the amateur athletic unions when I came to them, and with a guy by the name of Gino Grajeda and our old friend Roger Gowdy, who was in charge of volleyball. We developed beach volleyball for juniors across the nation. We flew in and out of cities, taught them how to conduct these tournaments, and so we grew what was non-existent for juniors to be able to play, they'd have to play with adults, into a sport that eventually led to collegiate beach volleyball, Olympic beach volleyball, and so now we host the big events out here. So as I did all of that for an awful long time, I was at a school not far from here as an athletic director, and it was just time to transition. It was time to, in effect, tell stories. And I want to tell stories of my experience in athletics, everything from having been an administrator for youth to interacting with adults and being in higher levels as well. When I grew up, right over there, Pauley Pavilion, I would wait for those games, and John Wooden's UCLA Bruins. When I grew up too, my uncle was a famous ring announcer who was well connected within the boxing community and outside of that. So all of those things really just charged me, and I was so into it. My godfather took me to Laker practices in 1972, and I got to watch Jerry West and those guys, and eventually come full circle where I got to interview Jerry West.
How was that?
That was most of the time I try to be very journalistic and super prepared. Every once in a while I just look up from my notes. I'm like, that's freaking Jerry West.
Are you just in awe the entire time?
And it was great. So it is. It's been exciting to start into this new venture. Mm-hmm. And so we've done fine. We've distributed primarily on YouTube, and then it got picked up on local cable television. We won some awards for our Jerry West interview, which has since elevated our ability to distribute and to raise what we're doing on streaming services and the like.
Okay, that's great. Such an awesome job. Such great work you're doing with the youth as well.
Yeah.
I'm sure that has lasting impacts in many, many athletes' lives. I know me running, when I was running youth track, it impacts you, and
right.
it's a experience that you carry for the rest of your life, truly.
It is.
And you're also now working with the AAU Sullivan Award. Can you tell us how that even came about?
Right.
And give the viewers a little background on the AAU Sullivan Award.
So I've always been a student of sports history and always enjoyed it. Ever since I was little, it always fascinated me. Mm-hmm. As I mentioned, I came to the AAU basically in '94 to develop the beach volleyball. And then the guy who was in charge of volleyball, his name was Roger Gowdy at that time, he rose to become the president of all of AAU. Mm-hmm. And when he did that in the early, about 2010, 2012, he wanted to bring back the Sullivan Award to the place it used to hold in sports history. So the AAU was created in 1888, and we just don't have that kind of history in our country. And they were really there to codify sports for all of the athletic clubs New York Athletic Club, Chicago Athletic Club, Philadelphia, so that they could compete under the same rules. Those rules then got distributed via things like Spalding magazine and manufacturers. And so pretty soon the middle class and lower class learned to play sports. And it all kind of, that's the impetus, because it used to be just a wealthy men slowly but surely. So they joined along with the Olympic movement, which had re-kicked off in 1896. The modern Olympic Games started. And so the AAU held this important position in our country where it ran all of the competitions for amateur sports, but also the trials to go to the Olympics.
Okay.
And then basically AAU leaders would become the American Olympic Committee and take them to the games. Okay. So they, in effect, ran those Olympic Games and the process domestically all the way up until Congress broke them up in 1978 with the Amateur Sports Act. So they had this really unique. Now, what they did, one of the founders died, and they want to name an award after him, and in 1930, that's what they did. They named the James E. Sullivan Award, and it was going to be for the top amateur athlete in the country that also not only conducts themselves with great competitive zeal, but with character and morals. Mm-hmm. And that's how the award started. And the very first winner was Bobby Jones, who was a great amateur golfer who won what was then considered the Grand Slam of golf. He went on to create the Masters Golf Tournament, and he was a World War II hero, and he was quite a act to follow. And so every year you would either get a collegiate hero or an Olympic hero that would win that award. And that's been happening for 92 years.
That's amazing.
But it lost its way a little bit. You know, if you would have won that award and died, let's say, in the 1960s, 70s, even the 80s, it would have been opening paragraph of your obituary.
Okay.
It was that important. It lost its way as the AAU was broken up by that act of Congress and how they redesigned themselves as more of a youth organization, okay, right? And so as they did that, the people that were running the AAU were really more concerned with running their own particular sports. Mm-hmm. And so I think this just kind of fell to the side of their things to do. Now, they still gave out the award. There were still prestigious winners. They just didn't hold a spot in the media like they used to. Okay. And Roger Gowdy brought it back to New York Athletic Club, and now the new president, who is Rusty Buchanan, I think is going to elevate it even further. And so that's why I went to him and I said, I think I can do well with this out in Los Angeles. We could put this on, in effect, a TV show, TV awards show, and we could build this through what we got out here in Los Angeles. So we're on our way back.
I love it. I love it. Now, you mentioned amateurs versus the ESPYs, which is for professionals. Mm-hmm. So given the popularity of professional sports, mm-hmm, how does this amateur play or compare with the power and celebrity of all of the ESPYs and all of the brouhaha that brings? Absolutely, and therein lies it. Like that's a good question, because one, the term amateur kind of is irrelevant, and we have considered renaming that. So whether it's the top collegiate or Olympic athlete or the like, we'll see. Some of these athletes are professionals in their own realms, but our country's changed. Mm-hmm. All the way up to the Supreme Court. Mm-hmm. Name, image, likeness, that movement, NIL, that allows collegiate athletes now, mm-hmm, to monetize their image and likeness. Yes. It's been coming for a long time. And whatever side, you fall on it, it's been coming and it's here now. Given social media and how it's used, especially even by our elite high school athletes, the public attention, mm-hmm, mm-hmm, is more and more on what used to be amateur athletes, what are now what we would call collegiate and Olympic athletes. Okay. And so we feel that our space, that certainly ESPYs are going to deal with the highest earning professionals. Fine, that's great, but there's also a lot of other sports, mm-hmm, that aren't exactly the NBA, NFL, MLB, mm-hmm, right? Mm-hmm. That can be unbelievably exciting. We can bring youth back to these events because skateboarding and surf and extreme sports are now part of the Olympic Games. Okay. Yes. Right. We can embrace those, and we can also embrace our history that goes all the way back to 1930, where we can tell stories about people like Rayford Johnson, about Wilma Rudolph, about Ann Curtis, the first woman that won the award, about Bruce Jenner, who's now Caitlyn Jenner. Right. Mm-hmm. Like, we could tell American history through our sports history with the Sullivan Award while embracing what's coming with Gen Z and beyond. Okay, that's great. So it is Black History Month right now, and I know that there have been notable African Americans that have won the
Several.
Sullivan Award. How do you plan to continue or spotlight African American athletes?
Yeah, so the team I'm putting together, I like to call it like a dream team out here in Los Angeles, that's going to be putting this together. One of the things we're going to do with the award is create interstitials that go year round that support the award. Those are interstitials. Those will be a media push, whether that's video, social media push, what have you, on our streaming services that will highlight past winners, future winners, and the like. And this would be the perfect month to put a highlight on those. It's not just the Black Americans who won the award, but the ones who took a stand.
Yes.
Rayford Johnson took a stand.
Yes.
Wilma Rudolph came from an unbelievable place. She was one of 21 children, had polio, didn't even run until she was 12 or 13. And to figure that she came from the depths of poverty to sit with President Kennedy and discuss the Civil Rights Act, come on, like, it's crazy the history that's tied into this.
A lot of people don't even know that.
And they don't. And I would love to go back and tell some of these stories because they're compelling.
They are. They truly are, and they need to be told.
Jesse Owens.
They need a platform.
Jesse Owens did not win the award, but it's okay that we acknowledge, the AAU can acknowledge where it was at that place in time. So Jesse Owens, the great athlete that ran in the 1936 games, Berlin should not have had those games. It's not unlike what we're having a discussion with China hosting the games now, because what Berlin was doing and Germany was doing with the rise of the Nazi Party and what they were doing with their Jewish and other disparate populations, not cool on any level. But at the time, the AAU and the American Olympic Committee was under the thumb of Avery Brundage, who was a sympathizer out of here. And they voted, and he swung the vote for them to go. Now, the athletes, not really that conscious all the way through because media didn't work like it does now.
Yes.
Right? So they got on that steamer, they got over there, and Jesse Owens, in a stadium that sat over 100,000 people, won over all of those that were sitting in that stadium. He won 4 gold medals with a spectacular display of athleticism. Hitler, with his mistress Eva Braun handing out medals, shook all of the white athletes' hands, but when it was time to shake Jesse Owens' hands, he hit the road. Jesse Owens stood tall in that moment through that, but when he came back to America, he faced similar.
Of course.
And he didn't even win the Sullivan Award that year. As a matter of fact, when he went to the dinner, he had to enter through the servants' entrance. The AU has acknowledged that was wrong, and we brought up the descendants of Jesse Owens, and they received an award at the Sullivan Award. I was at the New York Athletic Club that basically said, this is the Gussie Crawford Award, the one and only woman that's been president. We're naming it after her for being a groundbreaker, and we're acknowledging what we did wrong in the past. And that's when I really bought in on the Sullivan Award. I said, excellent, yeah, let's own that past. So Cassius Clay was then Cassius Clay, now Muhammad Ali. His descendants won that award. Babe Didrikson should have won the award, and she didn't. And she and her descendant, same thing. So it's really, to me, the award speaks to a lot of America. And acknowledging what didn't go right in the past is part, I think, of being a good, conscious American.
I love it. I love it. So this publication is called Holistic Californian. And when most people think of holistic health, they don't really think of sports. They don't. Or if they do think of movement, it's like, oh, you do yoga,
Sure.
or you go hiking, which are viable forms of exercise.
Absolutely.
But I think being an athlete, you almost do live a holistic lifestyle because you have to eat clean if you want to perform well.
That's right.
Your body is in top shape, but it's also a strength of mental strength and spiritual strength, because running or just participating in sports does impact your spirit as well.
Absolutely, it does.
So how do you feel that sports serves the overall person, like the whole person, in a holistic way?
Yeah, well, so as an adult, I know that how much different I feel in getting a workout, which includes swimming and yoga most every day. I know how much that settles my mind to be able to put in a good day's work. But being a coach and an administrator of youth athletics for 40 years, I watched how important that was for young people. That one, yeah, sure, they need the physical outlet, but there's so many things that I think are often overlooked, like something's bigger than you because you're part of a group that's doing something. And you have to look outside of yourself and cohesively work together. That's a really important concept for a lot of young people who are used to ruling the roost by just being in their house, being at school, and coming home. To now have to be attended to a time and beyond time, to pack your bag the night before and be ready for the next day. These are all like life skills that can help, I think, the human body do a better job of navigating just life. And those are the skills you learn when you participate in athletics, and I think it makes you a better citizen later on in life. It gives you a purpose that's bigger than you.
Yes, yes, yes. And also with like things like nutrition and like you said, learning these life skills. I think it does build a certain type of character that someone who didn't participate in high-level sports doesn't experience.
Right. So you could get that. Like a lot of parents have said to me, "Oh, my child doesn't do sports, so on and so forth." And my response to that is, one, they should be involved in something when they're young, band, theater, whatever. Like have an obligation to a group. So that's going to bring out the better in them. But the second part is find some exercise that you like. As a human, look at where we came from. We came from hunters and gatherers who would chase an antelope forever. Like I had on Burt Mandelbaum. He's a great doctor. He's the attending physician for the United States Olympic Committee. He goes with our Olympic athletes. And he was on and he explained about how important it was for early development of our species to just survive. And it all came from exercise basically all day long. And look at the life we lead now. And we wonder why. Things like depression and there's all kinds of like social maladies that have settled in because we have a sedentary lifestyle that our bodies weren't intended to do.
Exactly. We were intended to move around.
So we're all intended to move around, and we all just got to find our own way. And you mentioned several of those, whether that's hiking, whether that's yoga, swimming. You don't have to be on a team, but you have to know what it means to behave in a group.
Yes.
And you got to keep the body, I think, physically active on some level to keep your mental health.
I agree. And even I think being an athlete, I know for me, there was, even though I ran track or I danced, there was also a spiritual part that went to that, because I remember sitting with my relay team praying before a race. And doing, or even when I coached, and we gather around and express gratitude that we made it this far. We went to the Junior Olympics, or we went to state championships, and that whole aspect of spirituality in sports. You know, you see LeBron with his team praying before a game, and I think that people don't talk about that as well. But it's part of the whole person experience, and I think bringing sports back to, well, not that sports isn't big, but bringing it to a more holistic, realizing it's a whole person endeavor.
That's right.
Not just a physical one.
And it takes effort and sacrifice. Here we are at this training facility for an elite university. These athletes that participate in track here, there's so many hours that goes into their training, and they're maintaining their education while they move forward. We hear about the ones that at the highest levels, football and basketball, so vast majority of athletes that are in NCAA schools that are participating in athletics are making themselves better people through all of this particular hard work. And we sit not far from the statue of John Wooden over there, who in his day was such an inspiration to so many. It wasn't just about winning basketball games. He didn't even say the word win most of the time. It's not about who's right, it's about what's right. He constantly lived by that creed, and he exemplified it at all levels. And he lives to this day as almost like a Buddha-like figure, because through sport he had this great success, which he termed that pyramid of success, which stands today. It's taught by Fortune 500 companies and in schools. What he did through sport raised all humanity that was around him. It wasn't just his own athletes. Everybody drew inspiration from his work. And that's something that sports can bring out, like music can bring it out, like lots of endeavors can bring it out. But the common factor across this is the whole person.
Yes.
Like as a whole person.
It builds you as a whole person.
And it rises all of us.
I love it. Well, we are about to close for the day, but I did want to thank you for
course.
joining me today. And tell the people how they can find you, how they can find your show, how they can find the Sullivan Awards.
Absolutely. Well, first, I know there's a shameless plug for my sponsors, but it's important because people like you and I want to keep spreading the good word, and so we need people that are backing us.
Yes.
So I want to welcome a new sponsor, which is called Athletes Go Live. That's a streaming service. That's a new sponsor. And then my local sponsors include Hot A Yoga, which we both know quite well,
Yes.
and Casablanca Restaurant, East Bay, and of course the AU always has my back across the way. And we support two charities that are really important. It's called My Stuffed Bags. That's because of my sister, and they reach out to children in crisis situations with a bag that gets them through that tough time when they're pulled away from their family in abusive situations. That's my sister, My Stuffed Bags, and then also the Heroes Movement, and that's my friend Mike McKay, and McKay runs a collection of trainers across the country who will train any veteran free of charge so that they can transition more easily from their traumas that they may have experienced
What a wonderful
in the world.
endeavor.
So those are our partners. So I got to bring those up. I'm at Sports Stories DL, so you can easily find me on Twitter. And then Sports Stories DL is our domain name. So it's Sports Stories, Denny Lennon, sportsstoriesdl.com is where our website is, and you can get everywhere for there. And we're syndicated on LA 36 cable television, which is really nice. They're a good partner of ours, and they've opened the doors for us in other cities. So we're now in Chicago, we're close in Manhattan, Tempe,
Okay.
in Houston, and that's nice to be part of like public access type channels, PBS local type channels, as we get our content out there to people who may not always
Is there
be.
a date and time that that Sports
Yeah,
Stories
in
airs?
LA, every 7 o'clock, Monday through Friday.
7 o'clock Monday through Friday on LA 36.
On LA 36.
I love it. I love
Yeah,
it.
yeah.
Well, thank you for joining me today at Drake Stadium.
My pleasure.
It's been great talking to you. It's been
pleasure.
great sitting here in this iconic LA stadium. And, everyone subscribe, holisticcalifornian.com, and join us. And be sure to pick up the print version. Thank you, Denny, again. And I hope we get a chance to do this again.
I'd love to.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.